on Google Meet it says you're on mute
That's
on
because
both of them.
on both of them.
Yeah, but I can hear you, which is really weird.
Monitor on. Monitor off. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. I see a signal now. All right. Okay. I'm going to transition back, and I think it should be working. Let's see.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Let us know if you can hear us now.
Hey.
I hope this is working.
Yeah, hopefully it's sorted out.
Ishan, just let me know when you hear from someone that it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think it's working
awesome.
now. Yeah.
So yeah, welcome to week. Is it 13 now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yep.
13,
week 13
of Cinema Club. We looked at 2 films by Hou Hsiao-Hsien, The Time to Live, The Time to Die, and Dust in the Wind. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting, kind of like, it's an interesting take on Taiwan from the films we saw the past couple weeks. I think between EE, Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, and why am I blanking on the name of the third film we saw? What was this other film by Edward Yang that we saw again just now? Completely.
I had
Taipei Story.
Taipei Story. Yeah.
Yeah. So just very just very different. We're looking into rural life now, kind of away from the big city, away from the whole idea of the modernization, and interestingly enough, we spoke about how Xiaoxian was the actor. He was Lung in Taipei Story, and we kind of talked about his worldview and kind of how he sees the world. And I think these 2 films actually show us who he is, and who the stories that interest him, and kind of like it almost feels like his character, or like something of that to that effect.
I think that just the connections between the 2 were fascinating, based on what you were just telling me before we sort of got things off. Is just that NJ from E is the same actor.
No, not the same. Not the same actor.
Not the same actor. Just the character is the same.
Yeah.
As one from Dust in the Wind.
And
then it's
sort based on a similar story.
Continues.
Yeah. Because the writer is the same, and I think the writer kind of the writer of Dust in the Wind also wrote E, and it seems like both of them are like parts of his or kind of inspired by autobiographical moments. So yeah. I thought that was just fascinating. I think it's just very it seems like the Taiwanese film community is very close knit, and they kind of all work together, and that's really cool. Did you want to start with The Time to Live and The Time to Die, and then go into Dust in the Wind?
Yeah, we could. So actually, it's what's interesting is that I was reading up about it earlier. Is that it's that both the films are part of a trilogy.
Oh, okay.
Like a coming of age trilogy, and it sort of starts with a film called A Summer at Grandpa's, and then it's followed by The Time to Live and Time to Die, and then it sort of ends with Dust in the Wind.
Interesting.
Which is it's very cool to look at, like, just to think about, just because I think all 3 films sort of came out a year apart from one another. So 84, 85, 86. And that's kind of it's kind of cool, just to, it sort of puts things in perspective, at least in terms of thinking, like, how does this like we were talking about just the connections or the closeness of the Taiwanese film community. Just how did these stories themselves connect together? Or like what's the connective tissue between them,
Mm-hmm.
other than obviously the coming of age aspect, which is the main thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of interestingly dealt with in each film.
Yeah.
And I think they sort of set, at least what I felt was that both of them was kind of in a similar zone, right, where they sort of put you in this mood
Mm-hmm.
to expect, I mean, or not to expect, but just like where you're sort of along for the ride. I think similarly to what we are discussing about Edward Yang's films,
Yeah.
right? It's not necessarily that like conventional. You meet a character, here's their regular sort of routine, and then like we're talking about, uh, something
That.
happens to them, and then it sort of begins, the inciting incident. Um, so I thought that, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I feel like you have them, but there's just many, and they're not as like grand in
Mm-hmm.
terms of just the tempo or the scaling.
Yeah, it kind of just feels like the flow of life as opposed to like this is
Hmm.
the character's mission and that's what he has to get to and all of
Yeah,
that. So like for
absolutely.
example, like you could argue with like the time to live, the time to die, like the father's death would be kind of like a inciting incident of sorts, right? Because it kind of
Hmm.
sets the
Yeah.
story into that deeper world where the character starts to like, and that's where the characters like starts to take part into like these like gangs of sorts after that and like the moments
Hmm.
after then that's where he kind of takes this like turn, I guess. um
Yeah, exactly.
but I mean, I think what's really interesting about his filmmaking, Hou Hsiao-Hsien's, is how he kind of just takes this very like observant viewpoint in
Hmm.
with the language of the camera and like the
Yeah.
cinematography and even the music, and it's very it's kind of distant. It's a little bit separated from the characters, and oftentimes like your scene, it's very interesting because he's not necessarily worried about like keeping a certain like energy in terms of like you know
Yeah.
like pull like in terms of like pulling you along. He kind of lets things happen and unfold in a very interesting way in these like kind of
Yeah.
longer drawn out shots, um, and it's just like the scene will start like maybe 20 seconds of just extras, doing something
Yeah.
before the actual
Yeah.
scene of the film, like the plot part of the
Hmm.
scene starts.
You're sort of just like set up. Um,
Yeah.
you're sort of it's kind of a situation or a scenario where if you were already, or like if you happen to be there, right, and
Mm-hmm.
like you were doing your own thing, um, and then this story is like unfolding in front of you,
Exactly.
like if you imagine like you were just sort of like going about your regular day, right, like
Mm-hmm.
if you were buying grocery, or like buying vegetables, whatever it is you're doing, um, and then you sort of see this whole thing
Mm-hmm.
unfold
Mm-hmm.
in front. Like I think I mean, I think one of the scenes that I remember, um, I think, or am I confusing the two? I think I'm confusing. I'm thinking of a scene from Dust in the Wind.
Yeah, but I mean, he does that in
We'll
both
get
the
to that.
films. He does that across the
Yeah.
board, and I think it's a part of his style, and I think it's just I think it's very it's it's kind of like, yeah, it's like you're walking down the street and you see this unfolded with you in front of you, and you're like, you happen to just be where the character is every time,
Yeah,
and just you
exactly,
get a sense of
exactly.
story from
I
it.
mean, I think I mean, I think just I think that they're playing with the tops, right? I think that's like a
Mm-hmm.
really that's like
Yeah,
an interesting scene, because it's just something that you could quite possibly walk past,
yeah,
right? Or like
100%.
be sort of like standing
Mm-hmm.
by, or and then this sort of just begins to unfold
Yeah,
around you.
yeah. No,
Um, but
I completely
I mean,
agree.
other thing, um, Sorry, no, just go on if you want to say something specific to
No,
this.
no, no. I thought I was like, yeah, you're like on the right track pretty much, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But another thing that I was thinking with, that I feel like really adds to it is the use of like music, right, and the scoring, which I
Mm-hmm.
feel is very is intentionally limited and constrained. You
I
know, because I think
I especially noticed the
uh,
music more like in Dust in the Wind. Um,
mhm.
because
Yeah, absolutely.
it was like the same theme. It was like this beautiful theme, and it keeps
Yeah.
coming back as like this transition moment from like one scene to the
Hmm.
other, and it kind of just like it does such a. I think it evokes the emotion of like kind of this world more so than the character. Like that's the thing. It's like
Absolutely.
a lot of music in general, like at least in the Western world, is like very much character driven. But I think this one is more about the world that you're in, like the themes and stuff that they've developed with the composer. But I think
Yeah, 100%.
also, yeah, it just like serves as a great transition from one like location to another or one scene into another, and it just keeps kind of coming back again and again. Um, and I thought that was fantastic. I didn't notice it as much in The Time to Live, The Time to Die.
I think it wasn't. It was sort of just. It was a bit more natural. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think more. I think it was just like amazing, where it's sort of just that tunnel, and then it's sort of like you're seeing it. Hello, sorry. I feel
Yeah,
like I was buffering there for a bit.
yeah, for a few seconds, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think. Um, but basically like just I was talking about the opening of Dust in the Wind,
Mm-hmm.
where it's sort of like just this light, and then I was like, what is going on? And then it just slowly like is on you without
Yeah.
realizing. And I think I like stopped and like went back and like watched it
Mm-hmm.
again. And I think what makes it really interesting is that you hear nothing in the beginning, right,
Mm-hmm.
but just almost like not ambient noise, but just like the noise of the train on the
Mm-hmm.
track and all of this stuff. And then like it's much later, I think like almost 5 or 6 minutes into the film when there's any music,
Mm. Yeah.
or any sort of score that's not um,
From the world.
like yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean,
Mm.
I think it's more, it might be more, maybe I'm just guessing here, but it might be just more polished in Dust in the Wind, or just like
Yeah.
even more intentional. But I think I definitely noticed it, not as overtly maybe, but I noticed it in The Time to Live and The Time to Die
Yeah.
as well, just because I think the main sounds that you hear is just of everything around, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then there's just like those bits and pieces of music, or like or mood
Mm-hmm.
punctuation that
Yeah.
comes in.
Well, I think it's interesting
Um,
because I think you also saw Dust in the Wind first, whereas I saw Time to Live,
yeah,
Time to Die first.
yeah, yeah,
So I think it's
exactly,
like the first film's kind of like this is the intro to the filmmaker and kind of the world that they
exactly, yeah,
create, and then
yeah,
the
yeah.
second to kind of expect, and you can see it
You're
a
ready.
little
You're
bit
sort of like
more.
ready for stuff.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But yeah, even that shot of the train, like you were saying, the opening, it's like you see that tunnel through the train, and it's great. And then he does the same thing where he shows you the two characters in the train, and the light, kind of going and coming back. And I thought that was
Yeah.
just such a beautiful image. Um, I think also what's really kind of just going back to like some of the cinematography stuff we've spoken about with Time to Live, Time to Die. I think in general he uses more like slightly wider shots and more depth of field, so you see a
Hmm.
lot. I think you see a lot more, whereas
Right. In each thing.
yeah, because you have like this bigger family, you have like the gang of like the friends that he works with and like that gangster group and whatever. And
Hmm.
you have like it's like more about this like kind of like this character, but then more in the space of the environment he's in, whereas Dust in the Wind is just
Right.
like about these two characters, and it's not too
Yeah.
focused
Yeah.
about the world that he's in. So like at least in the beginning, a lot of the shots that he uses have like that shallower depth of field. It kind of separates the two characters from the background, and I think he does that very well, like in the train shot too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Absolutely.
um Also, what's like what this is the one thing I maybe like, I don't know, maybe it's just like a circumstance of the way they have to shoot in Taiwan, but like it was kind of like a little bit kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say like irritating, but it just kind of bothered me a little bit, was that all
Mm-hmm.
the it seemed like all the sound and audio was dubbed, and it felt like, like
In which
in both the films.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
and it kind of felt like the camera was really far away, but we can hear all
Mm,
the conversations way out in the distance just because of how clear
right,
they
right, right.
were. Um, and so that kind of, I mean, obviously when you're making films in the 80s, I mean, maybe just because of like technology or just like circumstance, they had to do it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But that kind of was something that kind of was like, I wish wasn't the case. um,
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to think. I feel like I didn't.
I definitely noticed it first in Time to Live, Time to Die, and then I was like, oh, so that's kind of how they're doing it.
I'm. Yeah. I mean, I didn't. I don't think. I. That's weird that you meant. Now that you mention it, I feel like I like maybe like that's true, and I just didn't. I just sort of like ignored it. But I feel like I didn't
Mm,
notice it in Dust in the Wind as much.
yeah,
But I feel like, and now that as you say it, and I'm thinking about it, Time to Live, Time to Die, it sort of feels like it makes sense because they are. You're right. Like they're all so far away.
yeah,
Um, and then so I'm just wondering,
yeah,
huh?
and it could. I mean, who knows? It could be like whoever. It could be a mix of things too, because like whoever did like a digital, um, like
Version.
the digital
Yeah,
version,
yeah, yeah.
maybe they messed up the audio mix or something too. Who knows? So maybe, I
Mm,
mean, maybe not the filmmaker's choice or whatever, but yeah, just something about it. And I think also like the other thing I kind of, I don't know, more so than the other films we've seen, the subtitles that we saw felt very kind of like the most basic version of
yeah,
the
yeah,
subtitles
yeah, yeah.
possible.
I definitely felt that in Time to Live. Like it was
Yeah,
like a weird like um sort of. I mean, I think there were. I mean, there might have been just like mistakes also
yeah. So I felt like
in
I was losing
in them.
information.
Hmm.
You know.
I think that's one of the things that I've sort of. I mean, that's been a thing throughout all of these films that we've seen.
Hmm.
That I think is something like it's. I mean, it's a tricky subject because I think then you get into the whole idea of translation, right? Which is
Well,
something that people aren't doing
yeah. See,
in
I think
in
like
this
it's
case.
tricky because I mean it's also maybe a product of the time, right? But like at
Hmm.
that because like the 80s, right? It's like different because like if you look at some of the subtitles of the films we saw, like I think like I don't like, yeah, maybe something was lost in translation, but I didn't feel like something was lost in translation because they
Yeah,
did a good
yeah, yeah,
job of like
yeah. No, that's true.
keeping your like I think just like giving the language just seemed more detail so that
Mm.
you like understood some of the nuance, whereas with this film like I just kind of felt like I lost any sense of nuance, almost.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, I think the time factor definitely like
Hmm.
it must be a factor because I'm just thinking about it in terms of like even the sort of the Korean films that we saw that
Hmm.
were in that sense closer to today,
Yeah,
right? And I think you don't feel that as much
exactly, exactly.
because I think I'm wondering whether it's because people are more comfortable in both those languages, or at least have
Hmm.
like
Also,
whether or not they're like part of
mm,
the making of the film,
mm,
right? Like whoever is contacted or being sort of approached to put the subtitles together,
yeah.
I think has possibly that better like
Mhm.
command of both languages.
That it could be that it could also just be a matter of the fact that um you know just like when kind of like Korean, because like all the Korean films we saw were like pretty much like post 2000,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think
And
so.
so like just like in terms of like
Yeah.
a time, but also just like Korean films and like kind of their international reach, whereas like Taiwanese films and their international reach, especially back in the 80s, whereas like you can go back to like an Ozu film or like Japanese films from like what was it, like the 50s and 60s, and that has
Yeah.
even like that had so much reach even back then and now too,
Yeah. No,
so
exactly. Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it is in terms of just like how
mhm,
like when and how able were
yeah,
the teams working on it
exactly.
when this sort of came across, or
Hmm.
like when went out of like across borders, so to speak. Because I know, I mean, like I had a friend in school. I think you might have met him, but he's Korean, and he he grew up in Bombay and like speaks English really well. But I think people would get like were very surprised, like Korean people were very surprised who weren't as like used to English or had like been to English speaking countries as much, was surprised that he spoke both so well,
Mm,
or that like he spoke English so well.
right,
Because I think like if they were like cousins or whatever, they were just used to speaking to him in Korean.
right.
So I think it's just that's like an interesting thing as well.
Of course, yeah. No, so I think yeah, just something that kind of yeah, there's a couple things I wish were like, maybe paid more attention to, or like in a future,
Hmm.
if they do a future like remastering or re-release, that the
Yeah.
subtitles kind of just get elevated or whatever you want to say. Um, I think you're buffering, Ishan. Sorry, I'll just give you a second.
Oh shit.
No worries. Okay, you're back. Yeah. Do we want to go through some stills from The Time to Live, The Time to Die?
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. Am I back now? I think. Yeah. I just like
Yeah,
there's some issue with the Wi-Fi. I just had to like reset it.
no worries. Do you want to go through some stills from
Cool.
The Time to Live, The Time to Die?
Yeah, I can just pull that up.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a second.
Sweet.
Whoa, what is happening? Oh boy. Okay.
Uh,
1 second. I'm just
yeah.
opening that up. What? Where'd it go? Okay.
And
I'm just gonna do the entire screen.
do we have any comments or questions?
I'll just check
Yeah.
afterwards. But do you wanna? Can you see
Yeah.
this?
Yeah,
Because
I can
I
see it.
can't see anything other than the image.
No worries.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, just I mean, some of the frames and the use of light. This is another thing that I've just noticed more so with Asian filmmaking and Asian cinematography, is that they tend to like lean towards like softer light. And I think it's just because of like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a mix of things. It's partially like the architecture and kind of how that works. It's probably partly due to, just the geography of the place and the way light kind of moves through spaces. Um, but just this image here is it was just like a really striking image to me, um, like compositionally, um, just like kind of where it comes into like in the film, because there's like this moment where he's because the moment before this he's working out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think it's just like a great moment in The Time to Live, The Time to Die. Um, yeah, and it kind of just sets up the gang in a way too.
I feel like this. I mean, yeah, I think that just sort of that aspect that you mentioned about the light is
Hmm.
something that sort of is a recurring thing across. I mean, all of it. I think the films this week, last week,
Yeah.
maybe all of them that we've seen is just something that I mean, I don't want to say is like is a character, but like it adds so much just to
Hmm.
everything the film makes you feel, that it's sort of it's an equal part holding up the film as much as like say the story itself.
Hmm. And also very Ozu-esque, like the use of the lines, just
Hmm.
compositionally,
Yeah,
very very
I
similar
mean
to like
this
Ozu's.
just this is
Yeah,
is so nice,
yeah.
in this thing, and then I feel like it's like this is where your eye is sort of drawn, but then you also have the benefit of like all of this extra stuff,
Yeah, and also I
which
like
I mean,
love that there's like kind of like two stories happening in the same frame,
hmm
right? Like you have this group of
yeah,
three on the left, and then you have him on his own. And I think it like does
exactly.
something very interesting because in the like kind of like I guess you could say in the climax moment of the film, right, when his
Hmm.
mother is sick, he kind of
Yeah,
makes this decision. Am I gonna go help this gang out, or am I gonna stay with my family in this moment?
right.
And like you kind of start like you kind of see how he's like kind of an outsider coming into this gang in a way too.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean it's like very clearly, I guess, sets up the dynamic without
mhm,
like, I guess without like overtly saying it,
exactly.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
and that sort of like you sort of are shown this, rather than being told like, hey, look, this guy's
Yeah, it's not
the
done through
newbie or
dialogue.
whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Should I go to the next
Yeah.
one? I don't know if this is the next one that
Yeah,
you.
it's yeah, they're not in any particular. So this is where they're like, there's like a little, I think, like altercation between him and some other, I think another gang member, maybe like the
Hmm.
opposing gang.
Hmm.
But just kind of goes to that idea of like the observational moment.
Yeah,
Also
yeah.
the
I
camera.
think just the like having this like the
Hmm.
tree, like, and all of this stuff sort of in
Yeah,
between you and what's in that sense like the action or what's happening, just definitely like reinforces that
exactly.
like, we're almost like I was saying earlier, like we're just like walking by,
Yeah.
and like we've sort of stopped, and we're like kind of peering over, but like don't want to seem like we're staring.
Yeah. Well, also like in this, like the camera starts to the left of this frame and like pans over to this position.
Yeah,
But like, I mean, just look to the left of the tree. You have that man just watching. To the right, you have that man
yeah,
sitting down. You can't really see his face. But I mean, it's just like
yeah,
like
but
we're just
probably
another one of
watching
them.
too.
We're just another one of
Yeah,
those
exactly,
guys.
exactly.
So it just goes to that point of just like the observational kind of
Hmm.
idea. Um, yeah.
Okay. Then there's this one.
Yeah, so this is like when the grandmother, they find the grandmother has passed away
Hmm.
towards the end of the film. Um, and just like, I mean, yeah, I kind of went to like the idea of like the Ozu-esque, but also I just love how like compositionally they've created these layers,
Yeah,
or like just not layers, but like
the
heights.
levels.
Yeah, the levels of
Yeah, yeah,
heights.
yeah, yeah.
Just something
Absolutely.
very interesting
I mean, I
about
think
this
this is
moment.
this is sort of one of those which is like a more direct, um, one of the few times, I guess, which is like a more direct shot that we're seeing,
Mm,
right? Because in essentially like we're on the other side of it now, almost, if you were to think about it, where we're not like watching them,
yeah,
but sort of they're the ones that are looking in, and we're like looking out. So
yeah,
I feel like the shot that we would have been used to in some senses is the one like if we were back here,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
and like looking at it from, and seeing what's happening in this room.
Exactly. And he also uses like that, frame within a frame. So he has that negative
Hmm.
space on the left and right with the doors, and then kind of just frames them
Yeah.
within that. Also, interestingly, I didn't realize that. I mean, like Taiwanese architecture. I don't know if Chinese architecture is similar. Was so similar to like the Japanese architecture that we saw in
Japanese.
Ozu's
Yeah.
films. I did not realize there were
Hmm.
like those similarities of like the way the
Yeah.
house is kind of uh, and you have like those
Just the
tatami
sliding
mats.
the sliding doors and like the mats.
Yeah, I did not realize that at all, which was really fascinating.
Hmm.
We can go to the next frame. Is there one more? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few.
Oh yeah. So this one was like for me. This one was just so beautiful. Like when the mother was sick,
Yeah.
and like the fanning of in the heat kind of just reminded me once again of Ozu, but also just the
Hmm.
use of like kind of light and color and shadow. Like you have the two characters in
Yeah.
the background, in the light, but behind the mosquito net. And
Yeah.
then the
It's
foreground,
got that like gauzy texture,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, it's just very
Um.
painterly, like the
Hmm.
composition, but also the use of the color and light. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it almost is like a painting because like just the darkness in the foreground and like and I love that orange in the background, the yellow orange, and then like you have this bluish green in the back in the foreground, and like that
Yeah. Like
color
right here.
contrast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's beautiful.
like just as an image, it was so striking. And just
I
texturally
think the
too.
next one is similar.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Oh, okay.
This is no. I'm trying to. No, I think I might have. Yeah, but I think this one.
Yeah.
No, but yeah. Go on, sorry.
No, there's just something very like yeah, just very like painterly about this. And like
Hmm.
if I remember correctly, like almost the entire scene just plays out in this shot and like whatever the
Yeah.
conversation is and everything, it just kind of happens in this moment.
Hmm.
Um that's the thing I love about these long takes. They're not flashy in terms of camera movement. They're just they're just like that's the thing like modern day long takes that we see in films like for example like I mean even a 1917 or an Iñárritu's like
Yeah.
long take or this or that I think the camera movement becomes such a integral part of like their reasoning for doing it almost and like how it can like it almost
Hmm.
has like a certain showmanship to it whereas these kind of just have a little bit more of that restraint and it's just there and it's just like let it
Yeah.
happen in front of you and it doesn't feel as though they're trying to show off with a one take even though to pull off a one take even something
Mm.
like this every element of the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
performance has to be perfect and the beats have to be hit at a certain point and like there has to be a rhythm within that one take.
Right. No. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely like apparent in terms of like just the manner, and I guess just the way we're presented with all of these scenes. I think
Mm-hmm.
it seems, I mean, like it feels, I guess, so simple in the sense that like it's all just like it's all unfolding
Mm-hmm.
uh in front of your eyes, maybe like as naturally as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and like there isn't that layer of screen or camera or between us and what's happening,
Yeah.
which I guess you do kind of still see or feel when there is like you mentioned, when it's sort of like a technique that's like being highlighted or like displayed on show and saying like, look at what we're doing
You don't feel the
here.
presence of the lens,
Yeah, exactly,
or the
exactly. I think
filmmakers,
I mean that's yeah.
which is really interesting. I mean, even in this shot, like it's very simple. Like, I mean, if they'd moved like 6 inches to the left, you would have lost that thing on the right side of the frame where your cursor is.
Yeah, this
Um,
door. Yeah.
yeah, and then it changes the shot. You lose that observational quality. I mean, if you look at the frame without that, you're in. It feels like you'll be in the room with them.
Yeah,
But I think
yeah,
that's the
exactly.
thing. It's like always that little
Yeah, I mean
bit.
that's such um sorry, no, I think there's just some
Yeah,
delay right now.
yeah. You were saying something.
You were saying there's always that.
No, that's how they always like maintain that observational quality. They don't. They like it was always it's kind of always in the back of his mind whether it's like consciously or unconsciously, but that's kind of how he shows his world.
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
Should we go to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Again, I think the same.
Hmm. Yeah, just like you're in like two rooms over looking like you might be like the other brother like looking through a few rooms and seeing this thing kind of happen in front of you.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
just to that effect. Yeah,
That's it.
yeah. Cool.
That is
Um,
it.
do we have any questions or comments from
Oh,
anyone?
that is a lot of stuff. One sec. Let me just.
We can go through them and kind of.
No, nothing right now.
Okay, cool. Shall we move along and go into Dust in the Wind, I guess?
Yeah, yeah, we can. I think we've been like talking about them back and forth, but
Yeah,
but I guess just like more specifically.
yeah. And if anyone has
Yeah,
any questions
I
anywhere along
think
the way,
so.
feel free to kind of hop in.
Yeah. I'll read them out as well.
Yeah,
Once I'm just closing all of the images.
no worries. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, Dust in the Wind, I mean, we kind of started talking about the opening sequence and stuff and the music, which was just phenomenal. I think it's
Yeah.
also a great introduction to like go into this city and go into this, rural Taiwan, which is just so, it's so green and so lush. And I think it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I think there was so many like points that where it felt so peaceful, you know, and then we were just sort of seeing this like hilltop town.
yeah, the landscapes were just
Um,
gorgeous throughout.
yeah, and it was just like it was just incredible.
Hmm.
And then you sort of like I think that just that scene when they're watching that film, right? When it's like that
Hmm.
old school sort of setup where they like put that cloth up
Yeah,
like across the train, like these old train tracks. And I thought that there was just something so, um, it was just so, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just incredible where you have just these like, this like remnant, I guess, of a past something
hmm,
where, like this train, this one track is like, then like is not in use anymore. And then they're sort of like all using that area for something
hmm,
else.
hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
I thought that was just great. But also just kind of how they set that up, right? Where they're walking home in the beginning, and then
hmm,
they like say, "Oh, they're preparing for a movie."
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think just saying that what's interesting is the constant sort of background. I mean, not background, but just like the constant accompaniment of films in this film,
mm,
right? Because he like works, he's working at that like studio or the print shop,
hmm,
but there's also like a movie theater. They're like
yeah,
sitting behind, like sort of outside
yeah,
the movie theater, like in the crew area.
hmm,
And then that one of the friends is the painter, and all, like it's sort of just like film is like in the next room kind
yeah,
of thing, which,
yeah.
which I thought was a really nice.
Touch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not really sure whether it like changes anything in the
yeah,
film
hmm,
particularly. It just, but again, I think it just adds that
hmm,
mood and that like um just adds to the world that
yeah,
we're in
yeah,
again.
yeah. Um, no, I thought that was, yeah. I mean, I thought that was great. I thought some of the moments between the two characters were amazing. But then I think just like from a performance standpoint, just the ending, I just
Hmm.
really loved it. I mean, it's like you have that entire scene that just kind of is one shot of all those guys just playing pool or billiards.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that
I
was.
was just trying to remember the end because I just had that like I had that scene.
Hmm.
When he's sort of like very cool about finding out that she gets married.
Yeah,
Um, and then he's like in his bed and sort of just like finally like breaks down.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Um, that
which
moment.
I think was very unexpected.
Hmm.
Like I was not expecting. I was like, wow.
And that's like I think one of the only
Um,
moments you're in that like kind of like a medium close up and like kind of close to him and not as
yeah,
observational, and it
exactly.
changes. And I think it's like a great moment to choose to break that, like the language you've kind of set up as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he goes home, and then you have that like really nice little scene with his dad. And this is kind of where I actually really felt maybe the subtitles were not as strong, because he
Mm,
keeps, I mean, the dad's like, at least in the subtitles, the dad keeps saying essentially like a few times, potatoes are uh, harder, easier to grow than ginseng, right?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, but I feel like at least from the tone of what they were speaking and like the way the performance felt,
Right.
it didn't feel like they were
It.
saying that line like two or three times.
Okay. Yeah. I just thought it was some. It was sort of something that, um, in my head, at least the way I interpret it, was just that I guess potatoes are something that you'd expect are like sort of can like go through a lot in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like they're very low maintenance.
Yeah.
I imagine also this is totally just off the top of my
No,
head. I have no like
I mean
experience
they're
in
staple.
gardening.
So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like I feel like that's kind of, I mean, that's something that, the way I interpret it at least was that sometimes the things you expect to be easy, or
Mm.
that are like the constants, might require like a little extra attention and care
Mm.
every
Okay,
now and
so it's more
again.
like a
You know,
lesson.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe that's just because it was like repeated a bunch.
Yeah.
That's sort of what he was trying to say, because it's sort of like one of those things that like this is your expectation going into the world or whatever, right? And then I mean, I think in almost every scenario it's turned on its head, right? And then you sort of have to just like figure out new ways of dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um
Um. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like I was just that, but that was like a great little scene. I think to end the film, like kind of
mm,
going
yeah.
back to the rural space, and then that, and even before that, there's this like really great moment. Just visually, I think it's between him crying and then getting back home. There's this like
Hmm.
really long extended shot, maybe like a minute, of just this, kind of like the trees and then the sky. It's like this pinkish, purplish sky,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like a sunrise, and the music, and then the camera is just constantly just panning through it. And I thought that was
Hmm.
so like, it's just like there's a lot of these moments in both these films, and I was like thinking about it. I was like, if any direct, like it would take the life out of a director to convince a producer, at least in the Western world, to like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
allow that or let that kind of just moment kind of sit. But like think about it in terms of the pacing of the film, and like it after that, after he kind of has his breakdown moment, it does give the audience kind of this, it kind of shows a passing of time because that's how he gets
Yeah.
to home, but it also kind of just gives the audience like this moment to breathe and like a sense of relief after
Hmm.
this gut-wrenching
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
And like I feel like
I
the
mean,
audience
I
needs
think
that.
that's like one of the moments where it is maybe more conventional storytelling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where this is sort of that climax
Yeah.
end, right, that we don't expect almost. And then this is sort of just the denouement, which
Yeah.
we're seeing is that time passes as it
Mm-hmm.
does, and then he's back home,
Yeah.
and then sort of carry, like time sort of taken him along.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say one thing. I think like kind of to what you said, like while both the films may not like follow a three-act structure, I think that from a energy, like or energy or a pacing or a rhythm type of thing, they do follow that kind of that rise, the build up, and then the fall
Yeah,
off. It
yeah, yeah,
it,
yeah,
it might not
yeah.
be like,
I mean, I think we see it.
yeah,
Yeah, it might not be as like, I don't know how to describe,
it's
like
not as
high
objective
strung
driven.
maybe
Well, it's
is
not
a.
as objective driven, right? There's no like, because
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
like at least like Western filmmaking or like the three-act structure, they're like at the end of the like inciting incident, you're like telling the audience that the your hero needs this by the end of the film or is trying to get to this, and then everything is kind of
exactly,
in that,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
it's everything along that journey in the film is servicing that objective or goal. Whereas with
Mm-hmm.
this,
Yeah.
you don't really establish anything. You're kind of just flowing through it. But there is that
Yeah.
rhythm to
Mm,
it.
yeah. I mean, I guess the question I'm thinking about is just because there is that semi autobiographical element
Yeah.
to both films, right? Like, I wonder how much that as well
Mm-hmm.
comes into play here. Just because I think, I mean, like, I guess, where do you stay true to the story, like the real story, and then where do you sort of fictionalize it? Is, I guess, what I would,
Um. So
I mean, like,
I
not
get what you're
fictionalize,
saying
but like,
there.
you know what I mean, like,
I mean, I'm
um,
like, yeah, I'm thinking about that because like, kind of in a similar spot with the thing I'm working on right now. But
mm-hmm,
I think you kind of treat it as though you, I think you fictionalize it where you need to. Kind of one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago with Train to Busan was the philosophical stakes.
yeah, that's what I was thinking
And I
about.
think that's where you start fictionalizing, like where something can be more in service of the philosophical stakes
Mm,
than, because the thing is, in like at least the way life works out, not to get all philosophical
yeah.
and stuff, it doesn't seem like everything is going towards one point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but in
I mean,
the
I think that's sometimes, just to add to that, I think that's sometimes why people get frustrated, or like,
Mhm.
in, or sort of have this, um I guess, just feeling of the real world versus like stories, right? Because
Yeah,
then, we're sort of like, we're so used to seeing films, movies, books, whatever it is,
and we think that
that,
that's real life.
yeah, and then, like, that's real life, right? Like, you have this, like, I have this one objective, and I have this
Yeah,
one purpose that I need to fulfill, and like, everything I'm doing other
isn't.
than that is sort of wasting my
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
And then I think, I think if you're fortunate enough, you realize that, um that there are multiple things,
Yeah.
and it's not like one,
Yeah.
um
And so I
you
think
know
that's yeah, I think yeah, exactly. So like that's the thing. It's like life kind of has like it's not like one. It's not as
it does
linear. It's not
meander
linear.
in
It's
that
not
sense.
linear.
Yeah,
And I think that's where
exactly.
like at least for like filmmaking and storytelling, you can choose to like not make it linear in a sense or like not give it that one goal. But then I think that's the thing, right? How do you especially in a movie, maybe in a show you can choose to like meander a little bit, but with a movie I think you have to
Yeah,
give it that focus, and I think that's where like at least as a writer or a director you'll start to be like, okay, these are the moments
yeah,
where we can
yeah,
bring
yeah.
the story
Which
and give it that focus.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I think, which is exactly why, as far as I've, um thought of it or seen it, is that I find the translation from short story to film, like feature length film, works way better
Oh yeah.
than, say, like a big novel to a film, because I feel like you're forced to cut so much stuff out
Mm-hmm.
that, in like, when you're reading the novel, doesn't feel extraneous,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in a film, if you have to sit there for whatever 6 hour, like,
Yeah,
six
I get what you're
hundred
saying.
minutes or whatever, to do justice, um,
I think also like I mean
like, it just, like, you wouldn't be able to.
yeah, 100%. I think, and that goes to like kind of one of the like the like a writer that kind of does the opposite of what I was saying, where it's like giving it that focus necessarily, and which is why maybe like as a as a film, his work wouldn't like it seems like it would translate well, but then when you actually really think about it, his work doesn't translate well. Is Murakami.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
on paper you're like at first you'll be like, oh yeah, this might be really interesting as a film or a movie, but then like I don't know, I saw Burning, which is a movie that's based on
Yeah,
one of his
short
writing,
stories.
yeah, short
Yeah,
stories,
I saw it as well.
and for some reason like the as a film it didn't work for me. um
Oh, really? I really enjoyed that.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't read I still have to read the short story.
Okay.
But I like really enjoyed just the. I should watch it. Maybe we can add it to the list because I think it
Yeah.
was like an interesting one to like watch with this context. I just watched it randomly.
Yeah.
Um,
Same.
at the I think it was like a mommy screening.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I thought it was so interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I
In
just felt like
terms
it
of just
meandered a bit,
the
and I was,
handling of it. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it definitely does, and it is like a long quote unquote long film.
yeah,
But I like remember it being like it. I still like remember moments and scenes from it,
yeah,
and I
exactly.
always feel like whenever like a film does that, whether I like it or not, it still holds some value,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Like it because there's just like I think it does similar work to what we've been saying over the last couple of weeks, where it does put you in this mood, or like it
yeah.
creates like a palpable atmosphere,
Interesting. Yeah.
and that there is a lot of tension without much happening,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think like you have to give it the time. I feel like if you're not, I might just have been in the right like
Mindset.
zone, or
Yeah.
yeah, mindset to like receive it,
Also in a
because
cinema.
I do, yeah,
Yeah.
same. So I like it was really nice.
Yeah. Um.
So I think that obviously is crucial, and
Mhm.
like is something that we don't. Um, no, but I was actually thinking about his Murakami stories in particular as films, because I think they're so. I think the reason why we feel that they would be great films is because they're so visual,
Yeah.
right?
And the
Like they,
characters, you feel like you know
yeah,
them.
exactly. Like yeah, and they feel unique, and they feel like what you learn about them isn't necessarily what you would traditionally learn about a character, right?
Mhm.
Like they sort of feel like, oh, I'm learning about this person because I'm learning, oh, these are the things that they're good at or proficient at, but these are also the worries and anxieties and like fears or things they're kind
Mhm.
of shit at,
Mhm.
um, all naturally, and like all in through these like experiences, and and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
I was thinking of After Dark uh, today. I was talking to Liana about it this
Mhm.
afternoon, and I think that would make a great film.
Mhm.
But again, we don't know really,
Yeah.
but I feel like it would, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's sort of just like even the opening is so unique, because it like starts with just this bird, right? That you're I don't know if you've read it.
No, I haven't. No.
Uh, oh, you should. It's
I'll check it
awesome.
out.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's very short, also
Okay. Cool. But yeah, I
relative
mean,
to
but
his
like you
other
said,
books.
like a short, like I feel like short stories, it kind of you can expand it into a film and kind of give it that layer of depth that it needs. Whereas
Exactly.
like a novel sometimes can become like too much of an undertaking, at least for a
Because
movie.
I think what yeah, I think what happens, at least in the short story translation to film, is that you have those moments to
Hmm.
breathe, right, where you can set up, like we saw in the films this week, is the atmosphere and the the setting of each scene,
Yeah.
or like the sequence of scenes.
Yeah.
And then when you take a novel, I feel like you're just governed so much by plot and like what's happening, like, oh, I have to let people know this happened,
Mm.
this happened, that you sort of don't, like you have to well, let's say you have to be super economical
Hmm.
in how you convey certain
Yeah.
things,
I mean.
right? So that like you have to do like all of this work. It's like, okay, like this person, as soon as they
Hmm.
start seeing the film, they have to be with us in this world, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Harry Potter right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah. Yeah.
just because it's um and I haven't read the books again, because I've heard that people have told me that they've read the books again now and they have not enjoyed them as much, so
Mm.
I'm afraid.
Mm.
um
Just let it be. No, there. No, I
Yeah.
think to what you're saying though, I think what's really, I mean, not to meander too much because I know we're not talking about the movies anymore, but what's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be
I was.
but what's gonna be very interesting is I think especially now and give it like the next 5 years, um, because we're not necessarily bound to like on TV the episode has to be either 22 minutes or 44 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
A movie doesn't have to
Doesn't
be
matter
two and a
anymore.
half hours. Like you can do a movie in chapters. Like I mean, look at how one of the Tarantino movies just re-released with like the chapters for the Hateful Eight. And so you can watch it as like a series of
Oh,
four episodes.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's the same movie. They added a few scenes and then they made it 4 chapters
No,
instead
I
of
haven't. I
one
haven't.
long
Haven't seen
movie.
the movie.
Oh, you haven't seen the movie. Or look at
Yeah.
like The Irishman. You can make a 3.5 hour movie and put it on streaming, and
Yeah.
it's not a big. It's not. I mean, I think things are changing. I think you have other like
Yeah.
shows where the episodes are like 15 to 20 minutes and not necessarily 22
Exactly.
minutes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that's something that's really exciting. Is
yeah,
that in there? I mean, there are more pockets that are allowing you
you can experiment with
sort of
form.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's allowing experimentation with form that does justice or allows you to do justice for whatever story you're trying to
Yeah.
tell.
I mean,
Um,
even like Master of None, I remember like some episodes were 30
yeah,
minutes and then like there were like 2 or 3
yeah,
episodes that were like an hour. So
yeah, exactly,
it's
exactly.
it's more about it's not about filling out a specific time block, but more so just
Exactly.
like telling the
Yeah.
story the best way you can.
Hmm.
So yeah. But yeah, do we have any? I mean, do we have any comments, questions, anything from anyone about the two films? Now that we've
Nothing today.
okay,
That's cool though.
yeah,
I think we can. I'll just open up the films for next week,
mm-hmm.
and then we can announce those.
Yeah, week 14.
Yeah, damn. Woo! It's flying by.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's Zhang Yimou. Yimu.
Zhang Yimou, yeah.
Zhang Yimou. So House of Flying Daggers and Shadow, and Shadows on Netflix. Um, so we might do something a little different for next week. Which will sort of keep folks posted about. We haven't entirely figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
If we decide not to, we'll just do this. But we might do something slightly different just to change things up. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
We can figure that out. But
Sounds
yeah,
good.
those are the two films for next week, which will be, what's that date? Maybe we should start adding the date, which will be the 4th of July.
Sweet.
Wow, already in July.
American Independence Day.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That'll be good.
I'm not leaving the house.
Yeah. Oh man,
The
I'm
cases
sure
have
there'll
just
be so
been.
many people out.
There are already so many people out, and the cases have just been going up.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Cool.
All
Should
right.
we
sign off?
sign off?
Yeah. All right,
All right.
guys.
Yes. Thanks everyone who joined on.
Mm-hmm.
Catch you next week.
Yep. Take care. Bye.